Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Action Comics issue 1085 by G. Willow Wilson, Kevin Guidry, and Trish Mulvihill. Miss Marvel co-creator G. Willow Wilson joins the Superman Superstars initiative for a quick two-parter story that sees a heatwave hitting Metropolis. The unusual heatwave sweeping the city prompts editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet, Perry White, to pull Lois Lane off of her plan to fly out and meet some scientists in the Arctic, to instead cover the heatwave in the city along with the rolling blackouts. Lois is being pulled from the story since she's the only one Perry seems to trust, since all the new reporters he has are too dependent on their AI chatbots to write their slop stories for them. And already we're off to a very relevant start to the story, as all you need to do is go to any of the big news websites here and you'll find hundreds, maybe even thousands of articles that are just AI slop with inconsistencies and errors. You know, our writers just put like their notes through an AI chatbot and it's just spat out something that they haven't double checked. Perry railing against it is great as well, since he's a very, old-fashioned reporter, boots on the ground, reporters doing the real work. Lois agrees to do this, but only if she gets a 4% raise and if the building's air conditioning is fixed, which Perry agrees to before thinking of who to put on the Arctic research story. Lois luckily has an idea for that and has a chance to get her husband out of the office as she goes to see the busy Clark, scaring him since he's deep in concentration on his recent article. I've missed this kind of Clark in the comics the last little bit, the one where he's still keeping up the Clark act while at work and, he's a little bit bumbling and, easy to scare, quote unquote. Recent books haven't really had a chance to do all that much with him, so I appreciate they are getting it, even if it's just ever so brief. Lois tells him that she wants him to take over her article, since Perry wants her to handle the city officials on the heatwave and the blackout story. Lois says that she chose Clark too because she trusts him, and besides, he might be able to get some alone time up in the Fortress of Solitude. Before leaving though, Lois does mention that the Arctic is getting a lot more busier these days with scientists and surveyors, so we might want to dress a bit more discreetly while up in the snow. The next day, a very cold Clark endures a bumpy plane ride through northern Greenland. Eventually, he arrives at a base where he learns the people there aren't too pleased to see him, and not because he's a reporter or he's not Lois Lane, but because he doesn't have any of their supplies that they've been waiting for. Clark getting the spotlight over his Superman side is something that's been a running motif for the last few Superman Superstar books, and I think it's great. A lot of writers kind of speed through the Clark Kent stuff in order to get to all of the Superman action, and as I said before, the more bumbling Clark kind of making a comeback here when he's around people who, aren't really aware of who he is really quite fun. And here he's no different. He's, acting cold, he's kind of like falling and tripping and stuff. It's great. Clark introduces himself, but none of the scientists have ever heard of him, which Clark puts down to them not being subscribers, since he only writes subscriber-only stuff for the Daily Planet at the moment. The people introduce themselves as Dr. Pierce and Dr. Addison, who are up researching polar refreezing, but their work has been stalled since one of their computer mainframes has begun malfunctioning after a power surge, and now another mainframe has suffered the same fate. Clark is shown a big device in a hangar that, according to Dr. Addison, is a solar reflection array, which will reverse the melting polar ice caps and prevent the greenhouse gases from escaping the permafrost and ruining the atmosphere. Clark puts his investigative journalist hat on as he's shown some of the malfunctioning computers, wondering if it might have been sabotage, although why anyone would want to sabotage an Arctic research station is beyond even him. This is a pretty exposition heavy portion of the book, but it gets a lot of it out of the way quickly so we can get into the meat of the story. Before Clark can look around more, the base is invaded by two cyborg polar bears who come for the scientists. Before they can kill them though, Superman arrives and stops them, and now Clark took Lois's comments to heart, as he isn't wearing his normal red and blue suit. He's wearing something a bit more discreet, as he's wearing an all-white suit, which is honestly a great look for him. Superman recently has had quite a few number of costume changes, or like additional costumes to his more classic one. Joshua Williamson is doing loads of it over in his Superman ongoing, and I just think it's really cool because usually Superman only gets a new costume if it's like some big earth-shattering event, a crisis or something. So I like that they've kind of adapted this model, kind of like what they do with Batman, where like Superman's now getting like suits for like specific, situations. In this case, this is like his Arctic camouflage suit. Superman claims that he was in the neighborhood and heard that they had a pest problem. He takes the bears out of the base, wondering what made these creatures the way they are, but before he can get answers, the bears just teleport away, as if they never existed. Back down in the base, the doctors believe that they are being targeted by someone with access to a lot of resources. They then suddenly remember that there was a reporter with them, and Clark appears from behind one of the computers, telling them that he just passed out. I like that they don't even really bat an eye at this. Like, Clark is just so unassuming. They think, oh yeah, he's just a reporter, he just passed out because he saw cyborg polar bears. And I like that they just like are upset that like he didn't get to see Superman. That's quite funny. He asks them some more questions about the incidents, learning the scientists were on the verge of a breakthrough in their research, since if their array worked, it would be able to help humanity gain another 2 decades to find a solution to the melting ice caps. They believe that doing that pissed someone off, and soon find their connection to the satellite uplink is now down as well, meaning they are all stuck there until the next supply plane arrives or until Superman returns. Later on, after being shown his quarters, Superman heads into the icy tundra to scan for life forms. However, he can't see anything through his various visions, or anything that could have sent the bears. He figures whomever it is, they know how to hide from the world and from him, and it must be someone he knows, as they are staying one step ahead of him. Suddenly, he's attacked from below the ice by a giant robot, which demands he comply with its directions. Superman isn't too worried. Instead, he seems rather curious, as the robot was able to hide from his X-ray vision. Now, I really like it when Clark gets a little bit giddy when fighting a new enemy, or a little bit more curious. Something was able to get the drop on him, and he's really happy for the change of pace and the challenge the robot seems to give him. He does know, though, the robot doesn't actually stand a chance, letting it actually hit him, but nothing actually happens. He tosses the robot into the tundra, where it changes targets, seeing the nearby research base and going for it. Superman gets in its way, getting his attention, but the robot stomps on the ice, causing it to crack and break, which threatens the stability of the nearby Arctic base. Acting quickly, Superman uses his freeze breath to stop the cracking ice, and the distraction allows the real villain to reveal themselves as Kilgore appears, saying that if there were 17 other Supermen working 12-hour shifts, he would have been able to freeze the ice caps all by himself. But unfortunately for Superman, there is only one of him. Superman can see the villain has had some upgrades, and the villain cannot wait to deploy them against the Man of Steel. Kilgore making his big return here is really great, and a really surprising villain, since generally he's a Flash and recently a Cyborg villain. But he fits nicely into Superman's rogues, as Supes has a lot of alien intelligent cyborg villains like Titano, Metallo, and Brainiac, so he's a good fit for Superman, and I'm intrigued to see what he is planning for the polar ice caps and what he intends to do to the world. Action Comics issue 1085 is a pretty good book. It's nothing fancy and doesn't push any boundaries with the characters or, challenge a lot of their ideals like the last John Ridley run did. The book also doesn't really dig deep into the climate change story that it's setting up, but Wilson does begin a cool, unintended, adventure for Superman with a surprising villain twist at the end. Here's hoping the next issue can bring a bit more meat into the story. I'm going to give this issue a 7.5 out of 10.